Hello, everyone. It's Caroline here. Welcome back to our series of lessons in the Cold War. And this lesson, we're going to go to Berlin for the first time. We are going to come back to Berlin a lot throughout the Cold War. It is a city that is a real crisis point for both the Soviets and the Americans. And sometimes this can trip us up. So, unfortunately, a lot of the time we go back to Berlin, it's called the Berlin Crisis. And then there's a date after it. So, whenever you're in the exam and you see the word Berlin, I need an alarm to go off in your head, like a little red flag to start waving. Got to look at the dates. So, 1948 is the first time we go to Berlin. So, anytime you see Berlin, look at the date. Make sure you go into the exam knowing really well which crisis is which date. Because the last thing you want is to come out and be like, I wrote all about this event, and then find out it was a different time of Berlin. So, the history of Berlin in the Cold War, it's super interesting. You're going to enjoy learning about it, but just make sure you know which event is which. So, by the end of this lesson, you can explain the causes, events, and consequences of the Berlin crisis. So, we're 1948. So, starting off, let's look at a source just to remind ourselves of where we are up to in the Cold War. So, this is a British cartoon from June 1947. It's called Rival Buses. So, those are like old style buses, so carriages. What can you learn from this source about the tensions between America and the Soviets, 1947 to 1949? So pause the video, have a go. What is the artist trying to say? So some of the things you might pull out. These people represent the European countries. We can see this gentleman here is Hungary. At the front, we've got Bulgaria. We've got Austria. So it's not just the satellite states, it's all the states in Europe. You can see Turkey sitting in the carriage for America. So we've got European countries there. We can see as well that Stalin is being really aggressive. So he is grabbing people and he's pushing people into his bus, his carriage. So it's suggesting Eastern European countries aren't getting a say in it, that they're being forced into the Soviet side. And then for America, we've got the Liberty Hotel compared to the Russian one. So the Liberty Hotel, it says underneath, comfortable accommodation. And then the Pension Roost, it says inclusive terms. So the suggestion that the American one is a choice, that it's going to be nice and pleasant. The Russian one, you're going to be forced into it. You can also see Truman there is not grabbing people and forcing them into the American one. He's got quite a pleasant look on his face. He's raising his cap politely. He's inviting them to be in the American side. So this is where we are up to so far. So along the top row, we've got the wartime conferences. This picture's missed out Tehran, but we would say about Tehran in 43. And then it's got Yalta and Potsdam. Moving on, we've looked at Churchill's Iron Curtain speech. And alongside that, we would put in about the telegrams as well. And then last lesson, we were looking at the Truman Doctrine and the Marshall Plan, which are really linked. So remember the Truman Doctrine or Truman's policy. Any country that looks like it's going to become communist, America's going to intervene. And they're going to do that with the Marshall Plan. So give those countries money, get them back on their feet. Communism won't look so appealing. Which takes us up to Berlin. So what we're going to look at this time, the blockade and the airlift. So just a little reminder of where we are with Berlin. So at the Potsdam Conference in 1945, it was officially decided Germany was divided in two zones along the lines of communist and capitalist. And we can see it on the map there. So there's a Russian zone, a British zone, an American zone, and a French zone. And if you remember, both sides have very different motives. So Britain, America, and France, the capitalist zones, they're learning the lessons from history. So after World War One, they were really harsh on Germany and it caused enormous trouble. So after World War Two, they're like, let's not make the same mistakes we did before. Let's help Germany rebuild, get back on her feet. Russia is like, that is lovely. That's very warm and fuzzy, but we need money to rebuild lots of cities that have been destroyed in the war. Where is that money coming from, if not from Germany? So, right from the start, they've got different ideas about what should happen with Germany. These zones were supposed to be temporary. It was supposed to be a temporary little divide. Germany gets back on its feet, becomes Germany again, was the original idea. And a big problem is Berlin. So it's Germany's capital city. Do we remember when we were talking about the divisions? It's right in the middle of the Russian zone. So you can see that it's very close to that eastern border. So from Russia's point of view, they're like, it just happens to be in our zone. So it's our city. The others are like, that's not fair. It's not fair that you get the capital city. So what they agree reluctantly on behalf of the Russians is that they would divide Berlin as well. So Berlin is going to get divided into Russian zone, British zone, American zone, and the French zone. Lots of people in Berlin are anti-Russian at the time, and it's because Berlin was taken back from the Nazis by the Russian army. The Russian army at the end of World War II are coming from the east, and they get to Berlin before the British and the Americans. And unfortunately, they commit a lot of atrocities, a lot of war crimes against German civilians in Berlin when they take it. So, for the German people in Berlin, there is a lot of anti Russian feeling. So people in Berlin that are in the British, American, French zones do not want to be in the Russian zone. So they consider themselves lucky to be in the bit of Berlin that's held by the capitalists. So Berlin is always going to be a sore point when it comes to the Cold War. So what happens to cause the crisis? The Western zones decide that they are going to unite. So December 47, the occupying powers, they're no longer working together when it comes to Germany. They try and have talks about what's happening in Germany, Soviet Union, storm out. The four zones of Germany are not being run together. So 47, Britain and America combine their two zones into one area, which they call bizonia or two zones. In 48, France joins theirs too, so now it's called trizonia, three zones. And here's what it looks like. So it goes from four zones to two. So British, America, and French join together. They call themselves trizonia. Later on, they just become West Germany, East Germany, and West Germany. But Berlin is still divided. So West Berlin, East Berlin. And then they go a step further. So June 48, the Western powers created a new single currency for Trizonia. So all the zones in Trizonia or West Germany are going to use this new currency, the Deutschmark. So this is a real sort of red flag to Stalin. So he feels that they won't work with him, that they're not reasonable, they've always treated him unfairly, doesn't like the fact that they've got a single currency that they're going to be using. So what he comes up with is this kind of attitude of, you don't want to be friends with me, you don't want to work together, that's absolutely fine, but then get out of my zone. So if we're going to do this separately, you guys are going to go off and form Trizonia, and I'm going to be left here with just the Russian zone. That is fine, but get out of my zone. So here's how he's planning to do it. all of the supplies for West Berlin travel in by road, by rail, a few by a canal. So there's a river going through Berlin. In June 1948, Stalin closes off all of the land routes into West Berlin. So if we go back, so if you look on the map, that zone for the West in Berlin, they are right in the middle of the Russian zone. So Stalin controls all of the land around Berlin. So he can put up blockades, he can surround the Allied bit of Berlin and stop anything going in or out. So that's called a blockade. You block someone from going in, it's a blockade. So he can't close off the air route because people can fly in and out. That's not he can't do anything about that other than shoot down a plane, which is going to start a war. But he can close all the land routes. What Stalin thinks will happen is not a lot, that the Allies will just go, oh, fine, if it means that much to you, you can have Berlin, who cares? He thinks the Allies are going to be like, there's nothing we can do about this other than give in and just leave Berlin. So in July, he stops supplying their food and cuts the electricity. So within that month, the Allies do not say they're going to leave Berlin. So Stalin's ramping it up. He's like, there is going to be no food, there's no electricity, there's no medicines, there's no fuel. Nothing is going in and out of Berlin by land. So he thinks this is going to make them leave Berlin. It'll be a humiliation for the Americans. He also thinks that he has the right to run his own zone without the Allies in the middle of it. So Berlin, West Berlin, absolute crisis now. So no basic goods. They've got food that will last them for 36 days. This is going to go on for 10 months where the only access is by air only. So what the Allies do is the Berlin airlift. They airlift everything they need in West Berlin in by air. So you can see there, planes take off with supplies every 3 to 4 minutes. So close to 300,000 flights just giving the West Berliners what they need. So, and it's a wonderful time of sort of everyone coming together. They get super organized, so 10 tons of supplies unloaded in less than 10 minutes. The Berliners themselves help with unloading the planes. It got very streamlined, very efficient. And it was this sort of look at what we can all do if we put our minds to things, kind of triumphant feeling. There is also a very sweet story of an American pilot that used to drop chocolate bars with little parachutes attached down to the children. So he was nicknamed the Candy Bomber or Uncle Wiggly Wings. It's quite hard to say because as he approached, he used to tilt his wings up and down to signal that he was the one that drops chocolate so the children knew. So Uncle Wiggly Wings. This is a nice little side story to the Berlin airlift there. So this goes on for 10 months, and we can see the little cartoon there. So the Soviets are closing the roads, the rail, but they can't stop the planes from flying in. And what happens? They wait 10 months, and then it's obvious that the Allies can keep doing this forever if they want. So the more they do it, the quicker they are, the more efficient they are, and they just know the Soviets that this isn't going to end in their favor. So they announced that they're just going to lift the blockade. So the Berlin airlift and the Berlin blockade ends with the Russians giving in. So consequences, and there are quite a few of these. So it is a really important event in the Cold War. So 1949, two Germanys officially established. Sort of shorthand, they're known as West Germany, East Germany. That's how I'm going to refer to them because I think it's simpler. But it becomes official. There are now two countries. West Germany, East Germany, going to be run totally differently. Stalin's actions could have caused 2 million people to starve to death. What he did was brutal. So, no food, no fuel, no electricity, no medicine if he'd had his way. So, he looks terrible. He looks aggressive. America looked like the heroes that came in and saved Berlin. So, disaster for the Russians, PR, massive victory for America. Stalin had also eventually backed down, which made him look weak. And at the same sort of the other side of that is America refusing to back down and looking strong. So, last little thing 1949, America set up NATO. So, with their Western allies. So, it's an alliance system. It's still around today. That they agree that if one country is attacked, the others will help. So, the West version is NATO. 55, Stalin sets up the Soviet version, which is called the Warsaw Pact. So it's, if you say it quickly enough, like a friendship group, but they all agree they've got each other's back. So if one person gets attacked, the others will help them out and protect them. So NATO for the capitalists, Warsaw Pact for the communists. And that, if we go back to that little chart, that's where we end up with on the chart. So, as a result of the Berlin blockade, we get NATO and the Warsaw Pact. More on those in a bit.